The store's clock chimed 13 times at midnight. The last note didn't ring the way the others had. The first 12 chimes were normal, clean, metallic strikes that echoed softly off the glass refrigerator doors and the tiled floor. But the 13th sounded wrong. It dragged through the air like a nail drawn slowly across metal, stretching longer than a clock should allow. Then the sound stopped, and the store felt different. I stood behind the counter with the price gun still in my hand. The roll of stickers hung loose, swaying gently though there was no breeze. For a moment I thought maybe I'd imagined it. Maybe I'd counted wrong. But the clock on the wall above the cigarettes said 12 o'clock. The second hand wasn't moving. The fluorescent lights overhead hummed louder than usual, a soft electrical buzz that seemed to vibrate through the glass candy jars and down into the counter. "Okay," I said quietly. My voice sounded small in the aisles. Outside, the street beyond the windows was empty. No cars, no pedestrians, just the yellow wash of the parking lot lights and the dark line of trees beyond them. I looked back at the clock. Still 12 o'clock. The second hand twitched, then stopped again. I rubbed my eyes and leaned across the counter to check my phone. 12:01 a.m. When I looked back up, the clock read 12 o'clock. A chill slid down my arms. "Cheap batteries," I muttered. I stepped out from behind the counter and walked toward it. The aisles felt narrower tonight. I'd worked the late shift for almost a year and knew every inch of the store. The way the floor dipped slightly near the freezer, the spot where the overhead light flickered above the chips. But tonight the shelves seemed closer together. My shoulder brushed a row of cereal boxes. They rustled softly. I stopped beneath the clock. The second hand was trembling, caught between numbers like it was trying to decide where time belonged. Then it jumped forward. Tick, 12:01. The lights dimmed slightly, then brightened again. The hum deepened, as if the electricity running through the building had thickened. Behind me something clicked. I turned. A freezer door had opened a few inches. Cold air spilled out in a pale cloud that drifted across the tile. I walked toward it slowly. The door creaked when I pushed it shut, the rubber seal whispering against the frame. For a moment I stood there, listening. Nothing but the lights. Then, chime. I froze. The clock struck once. I looked up at it from across the aisle. The minute hand hadn't moved. 12:01. Another chime rang out. Slow, heavy. Chime. 2. My stomach tightened. The store suddenly felt smaller, like the ceiling had lowered by an inch. The air was colder now. Chime. 3. The sound rolled down the aisles, bouncing off glass and metal. I took a step backward. The cereal boxes behind me shifted slightly, though I hadn't touched them. Chime. 4. "Okay," I whispered. My breath fogged faintly in front of me. Chime. 5. Somewhere in the store, a plastic wrapper crinkled. I turned my head toward the snack aisle. The shelves were empty, but something had moved. I was sure of it. Chime. 6. The lights flickered. The shadows between the aisles stretched longer than they should have. Chime. 7. The clock face looked wrong now. The numbers seemed slightly too close together, as if the circle had shrunk. I stepped toward the counter. Each step sounded louder than normal. Chime. 8. The humming lights shifted pitch, like a breath being drawn slowly through teeth. Chime. 9. The store windows had fogged over. I hadn't noticed when that happened. The outside world was gone now, replaced by a dull gray smear. Chime. 10. The aisles creaked softly, shelves settling, or moving. I turned slowly. The aisle behind me seemed longer than it had been a moment ago. The back wall felt farther away. Chime. 11. The sound vibrated through the floor, through my shoes, through my bones. Chime. 12. I stared at the clock. The hands hadn't moved. 12:01. The 13th chime never came. Instead, something else happened. The humming lights stopped. Not flickered. Stopped. The sudden silence pressed against my ears so hard it hurt. And in that silence, I heard breathing. Not mine. Soft. Slow. Somewhere in the aisles. I turned toward the sound. "Hello," I called. The word came out thin. The breathing stopped. Then a single fluorescent light above the soda cooler flickered back on. Just that one. This pale glow cut across the floor like a spotlight. And in that light, the aisle had shifted. The counter was farther away now. The door too. The shelves leaned inward slightly, forming a narrow corridor that hadn't been there before. I swallowed. The clock chimed again. Chime. 1. But it wasn't midnight anymore. The clock still read 12:01. Yet the sound echoed like the beginning of another count. The light above me flickered. Chime. 2. The aisle narrowed further. Boxes tilted toward me. Chime. 3. The breathing returned. Closer now. Somewhere behind the cereal shelves. Chime. 4. The clock face warped slightly. The numbers slid, rearranging themselves like slow-moving insects. Chime. 5. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. The screen read 12 a.m. Chime. 6. A freezer door opened again. Cold air spilled across the floor. Chime. 7. The aisle behind me was gone. Just shelves. Endless shelves. Chime. 8. The breathing was right beside me now. Warm. Patient. Chime. 9. The clock's second hand spun wildly, then snapped back to the top. Chime. 10. The lights flickered in sequence down the aisles. One by one, like something walking through them. Chime. 11. The shelves leaned closer. Close enough to brush my shoulders. Chime. 12. I looked up at the clock. The hands reset. 12 o'clock. The store exhaled. The humming lights returned all at once. The windows cleared. The aisles widened. Everything snapped back into place. The clock chimed once. Chime. I stood frozen beside the cereal. The store was normal again. Quiet. Empty. Outside, a car drove past slowly, its headlights sliding across the windows. I looked at the clock. 12:01. The second hand moved smoothly now. Tick, tick, tick. I waited. Nothing else happened. Finally, I walked back behind the counter. My hands were shaking slightly as I picked up the price gun. Just tired, I said aloud. The store hummed softly around me. Then the clock began to chime. I looked up slowly. It rang once, then twice, then 3 times. The minute hand hadn't moved. And somewhere in the aisles, something breathed in, waiting for 13 again. The woman walked in with a shopping list written in my handwriting. She held the paper out the moment the door's bell finished ringing, as if the list itself were the only reason she'd come. For a second, I didn't take it. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, a constant electric buzz that filled the silence of the store. It was almost 2 in the morning. The town was asleep. The windows reflected only the bright interior and my tired face behind the counter. The woman didn't speak. She just stood there, arm extended, the folded paper between 2 fingers. Need help finding something? I asked. My voice sounded normal, casual. The way it always did during night shifts when customers wandered in half awake for cigarettes or instant noodles. She tilted her head slightly. Everything, she said. Her voice was calm, almost distant. Then she pushed the paper closer. I took it. The paper was cold. Not cool from outside air, cold the way freezer shelves felt if you touched them too long. I unfolded it slowly. The paper made a soft crackling sound that seemed louder than it should have been. The list had 7 items, written in black pen. In my handwriting. Not similar. Mine. I knew every loop and crooked angle. I wrote grocery orders and inventory notes every night. My G always dipped too low. My T crossed slightly upward. Every letter on the page was exactly like that. I stared at the first item. Milk. That was normal enough. Back wall, I said automatically, pointing toward the coolers. But my eyes moved to the second line. Instant ramen, the red one. My stomach tightened. That was the kind I bought during my break every shift. I'd never told anyone that. The woman didn't move. She was watching me read. The fluorescent lights buzzed louder. I glanced up. You want all this? I asked. Yes. Her voice stayed flat. I looked back at the paper. The third item made my throat feel dry. Black coffee. No sugar. That wasn't strange either. Except the store didn't sell plain black coffee this late. We shut the coffee machine down at midnight. I knew that, and so did anyone who lived here. My eyes moved down. The fourth item wasn't a product. The dream about the hallway. I stopped breathing for a moment. The paper trembled slightly in my hands. "What is this?" I asked. The woman didn't answer. Behind her, the door glass reflected the aisles stretching back in long fluorescent lines. Everything looked normal, except the store felt quieter now. The humming lights seemed deeper somehow, vibrating through the floor. I looked at the fifth item. Strawberry gum, the one you stopped buying. A cold pressure spread through my chest. I used to buy strawberry gum every shift. I stopped last month. After that dream. The hallway. Long, narrow, endless shelves. Walking through them while something watched from the end. I'd never told anyone that dream. Not even jokingly. I looked up again. "How did you write this?" I asked. "I didn't," she said. Her eyes flicked briefly toward the aisles. Then back to me. "You did." The lights flickered. Just once. The sound of the freezers humming along the back wall deepened, pushing cold air slowly through the store. I swallowed and looked back at the list. 2 items left. The 6th line was written smaller, like the pen had pressed harder into the paper. "The Tuesday you forgot." My heart started beating faster. "What Tuesday?" I said quietly, but the words felt hollow, because something about that sentence stirred a memory that refused to form, like trying to remember a dream after waking. The woman leaned one elbow on the counter. "You should keep reading," she said. The paper rustled in my hands. The final line sat alone at the bottom of the page. I stared at it. It was written darker than the others. Another copy of this list. The lights flickered again. Longer this time. For a moment the store dimmed enough that the aisles looked deeper than usual, the shelves stretching farther back than they should. Then the lights stabilized. I folded the paper slowly. "You messing with me?" I asked. The woman shook her head once. "No." "Then who wrote it?" She looked past me, at the wall behind the counter, at the clock. Then she said quietly, "You did, earlier." "I didn't." "You don't remember." The freezer compressors kicked on with a low mechanical growl. Cold air spilled across the tile floor. I rubbed my temples. "This is a joke, right?" "No." Her voice softened slightly. "You left it for yourself." A faint noise came from aisle 3, the sound of a box shifting on a shelf. I turned. Nothing moved. When I looked back, the woman was still there, watching patiently. "Look," I said, pushing the list back across the counter. "If you want milk and ramen, it's—" "Keep it," she said. The paper stopped halfway across the counter. "Why?" "You'll need it." The fluorescent lights buzzed louder again. Somewhere behind me, the receipt printer clicked without printing anything. I picked up the list again despite myself. The handwriting looked more familiar the longer I stared at it. Not just the style, the rhythm, the way the words leaned slightly right when I was tired. Like now, my eyes drifted back to the 4th line. The dream about the hallway. I glanced toward the aisles. For a moment they seemed narrower than usual. The cereal shelves closer together. The overhead lights forming a long glowing corridor. I blinked. The store snapped back to normal. "You've been writing them," the woman said softly. "Writing what?" "Lists." "When?" "After midnight." I felt a slow chill crawl up my back. "That's not funny." "You don't remember," she repeated. I looked down at the page again. The ink on the final line looked slightly fresher than the rest, like it had been written last. Another copy of this list. The pen pressure dug deep enough to crease the paper. My own handwriting. The woman straightened. "You should start collecting the items," she said. "What items?" She nodded toward the page. "All of them. There's no dream aisle in this store." She smiled faintly. "No," she said, "but you keep looking for it." The doorbell rang suddenly. We both turned. No one was there. The glass door swung gently, as if someone had just left. Cold air drifted inside. When I turned back, the woman was gone. No footsteps, no sound, just empty space in front of the counter. The store hummed quietly. I walked around the counter and checked the aisles. Nothing. No one. Just the narrow fluorescent corridors I'd walked 1,000 times. When I returned to the register, the list was still in my hand. I stared at it for a long time. Then I noticed something new. At the very bottom of the page, beneath the last item, another line had appeared. The ink still wet, written slowly, unevenly, as if someone had just finished it. In my handwriting, "Ask the woman where the hallway starts." I looked up sharply. The store was empty, but the lights above aisle 3 flickered softly, and the paper in my hand rustled, like someone nearby had just finished folding another copy.